The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, which seemed fitting somehow. Tuesdays were the kind of days when life-changing things happened quietly, without the drama of a Monday or the anticipation of a Friday. It was yellowed at the edges, the address written in a shaky hand that Sarah recognized immediately, even though she hadn't seen her grandmother's handwriting in 15 years. The postmark was dated 3 weeks ago. Her grandmother had been dead for a month. Sarah stood in her small apartment kitchen, the morning light filtering through curtains she kept meaning to replace, and stared at the envelope as if it might disappear. Her coffee grew cold on the counter. Outside, the city hummed with its usual Tuesday rhythm, people rushing to jobs they tolerated, lives they'd settled into. But inside apartment 4B, time had stopped. She turned the envelope over. On the back, in that same trembling script, were 4 words that made her chest tighten: "When you're ready, sweetheart." Sarah wasn't ready. She hadn't been ready when the hospital called. She hadn't been ready at the funeral, where distant relatives she barely knew had patted her arm and said things like, "She's in a better place, and at least she's not suffering anymore." She hadn't been ready when she'd boxed up her grandmother's belongings, donated most of them to charity, and tried to pretend that the woman who'd raised her was just gone. But ready or not, the letter was here. Sarah had been 7 years old when she'd first run away from home. She'd made it 3 blocks before her grandmother found her, sitting on the curb outside Mr. Peterson's hardware store, a backpack full of crackers and her favorite stuffed rabbit beside her. "Going somewhere?" her grandmother had asked, settling down on the curb next to her with a grunt. Even then, her knees had been bad. "Away," Sarah had said, her 7-year-old voice defiant. "Mom said she's leaving again and I'm not staying with strangers." Her grandmother had been quiet for a moment, watching the cars pass. Then she'd said, "You know, I was thinking of taking a trip myself, could use some company, you interested?" That trip had been to her grandmother's house, a small 2-bedroom cottage at the edge of town with a garden that always smelled like lavender and tomatoes. Sarah had never left. Now, 23 years later, Sarah was 30 and still running, though she'd gotten better at calling it other things. Career opportunities, she told people when she'd moved across the country. Fresh start, she'd said when she'd changed jobs 3 times in 2 years. Just not ready for commitment, she'd explained to the last guy who'd wanted something more. The truth was simpler and more complicated. She ran because staying meant risking the kind of loss that had shaped her entire life. Her mother had left when she was 5 and never really came back, not in any way that mattered. Her father had been gone before she had memories of him. And her grandmother, the one person who'd stayed, who'd been there for every skin, knee, and bad dream and heartbreak, was now a box of ashes in a columbarium she couldn't bring herself to visit. Sarah set the envelope on her kitchen table, a second-hand thing she'd bought from a couple who was moving to Portland for a new adventure. She'd wondered at the time if they were running too, or if some people actually knew how to move toward things instead of away from them. She poured her cold coffee down the sink and made a fresh cup, then another. She showered, got dressed for work, and left the apartment with the envelope still sitting there, sealed and waiting. At the office, she couldn't concentrate. She was a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm, the kind of job that paid well enough and demanded just enough of her attention to keep her from thinking too much about anything else. Today, though, the designs blurred together. Her boss, Trevor, stopped by her desk twice to ask if she was feeling all right. "Fine," she lied, and he'd nodded, unconvinced but too polite or too busy to push. Her coworker, Maya, was less tactful. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said over lunch in the break room. Sarah almost laughed, something like that. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." Maya nodded, taking a bite of her salad. They'd been work friends for 6 months, the kind of friendship that existed in the comfortable space of lunch breaks and coffee runs but never quite extended to real vulnerability. Sarah liked it that way, less complicated. But then Maya said, "My mom died 2 years ago, cancer. Sometimes I still reach for my phone to call her before I remember." She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather, but her eyes held something Sarah recognized. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. "It gets different," Maya said. "Not better, not worse, just different. The sharp edges smooth out, but the shape of it stays." She stood, dumping her trash. "Whatever you're dealing with, just remember you don't have to deal with it all at once." After work, Sarah took the long way home, walking through the city as dusk settled over the buildings like a blanket. She loved this time of day, when the harsh daylight softened and the streetlights began to glow. It felt like a pause between one thing and another, a moment when anything could happen or nothing could happen and both would be fine. She thought about her grandmother's hands always busy with something. Knitting, gardening, cooking, writing. Those hands had braided Sarah's hair every morning before school, had held her when she cried over her first breakup, had taught her how to make pie crust and how to change a tire and how to stand up for herself without apologizing for taking up space. Those hands had written the letter waiting in her apartment. By the time Sarah climbed the 4 flights to her door, her legs were heavy with more than just physical exhaustion. She unlocked the door, dropped her bag by the entrance, and walked straight to the kitchen table. The envelope sat exactly where she'd left it, patient and inevitable. Sarah made tea this time, her grandmother's favorite, Earl Grey with honey. She sat down, pulled the envelope toward her, and with hands that only trembled slightly, opened it. My dearest Sarah asterisk. If you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm sorry for that, not sorry for dying, mind you. At 85 it's rather expected, and truthfully I was ready. These old bones were tired. But I'm sorry for leaving you because I know what loss does to you, sweetheart. I know because I've watched you carry it around like a stone in your pocket since you were 5 years old. There are things I need to tell you, things I should have said when I had breath in my lungs and you were sitting across from me at the kitchen table. But I was a coward, Sarah. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. Some truths are heavy and I didn't want to watch your face change when you learned them. But you deserve to know, you deserve the whole story, not the edited version I gave you. So I'm giving it to you now in pieces the way I should have done years ago. There are 7 letters, Sarah, 7 stories, 7 truths. This is the first. You've always believed your mother left because she didn't want you, and I never corrected that belief because it seemed kinder than the alternative. But you're old enough now to understand that the world isn't kind, and sometimes the truth, however painful, is better than the story we tell ourselves. Your mother didn't leave because she didn't want you. She left because she didn't know how to want anything anymore. Grace was 19 when she had you. 19, scared and so desperately unhappy that I could see it coming off her in waves. Your father, Michael, was 22 and charming in that dangerous way some young men are. He promised her the world and gave her nothing but heartbreak and a baby she wasn't ready for. I tried to help. I tried to show her that being a mother could be joyful, that you were a gift, not a burden. But postpartum depression is a beast that doesn't care about intention or love. It wrapped around her like chains, and she couldn't see past it to the beautiful little girl who needed her. When you were 3, she tried to hurt herself. I found her in the bathroom, pills scattered around her. We got her to the hospital. We got her help. She got better, or so we thought. But some wounds don't heal cleanly, Sarah. They scar over, but the damage remains underneath. Your mother looked at you and saw only her own failure, her own inadequacy. Every time you cried, she heard it as an accusation. Every time you reached for her, she felt herself drowning. When she left a note for me. Not for you, because she couldn't bear to put those words in a letter you might one day read. But she told me to tell you that she loved you. That leaving was the only way she could keep from hurting you more than she already had. I never gave you that message. I thought it would be harder, knowing she loved you but left anyway. I thought you'd blame yourself, wonder what you could have done differently. So I let you think she was simply a woman who didn't want to be a mother. I let you carry that wound instead. I was wrong, sweetheart. I know that now, because you didn't just think she didn't want you. You learned that people leave. You learned that love isn't enough to make someone stay, and you built your life around that lesson. Your mother is alive, Sarah. She lives in Oregon in a small town called Ashland. She teaches pottery at a community center. She has a cat named Mabel and a garden she tends every morning. She's been in therapy for 18 years. She's healthy as someone with her history can be. And she asks about you. Every year on your birthday, she calls me. She doesn't ask to speak to you. She knows she doesn't have that right, but she asks if you're happy, if you're well, if you found your place in the world. I tell her what I can, which is never enough. The last time she called, it was your 29th birthday. She said, I dream about her sometimes, about who she's become. I imagine she's strong and kind and nothing like me. I told her you're exactly like her, stubborn, creative, guarded. I told her you're also nothing like her. You stay even when staying is hard. I told her you're both and you're your own person, and she would be proud if she let herself be. She cried then. She said, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I did the best I could, even though my best wasn't enough. I promised I would tell you, but I never did. I was still protecting you, still protecting myself. Her address is at the bottom of this letter. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to forgive her or understand her or even acknowledge her. This isn't about what she deserves, Sarah. This is about what you deserve, the truth and the choice of what to do with it. 6 more letters are coming, 6 more truths. I've arranged for them to be sent to you over the next few months, one at a time. I thought about giving them to you all at once, but grief is overwhelming enough without adding the weight of revelation. So I'm spacing them out, giving you time to breathe between them. I love you, sweetheart. I loved you from the moment you were born, screaming and red-faced and perfect. I loved you through every stage, every age, every version of yourself. And I'm sorry I won't be there to love whatever comes next. But I'll be here in these letters, telling you the things I should have said. Until the next one, asterisk. Grandma Rose asterisk. P.S. The address asterisk. Grace Morrison asterisk. 427 Oak Street. Ashland or 97,520. Sarah read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered. Then she read it again, slower, letting each sentence settle into her understanding like stones dropping into water, creating ripples that spread and intersected and changed the surface of everything she thought she knew. Her mother was alive. Not just alive, but living, teaching, tending a garden, asking about her. The woman who Sarah had imagined as selfish or cruel or simply indifferent was actually someone who had been drowning, who had left not from lack of love but from an overwhelming abundance of pain. Sarah's hands shook as she set the letter down. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. She stood, paced to the window, back to the table, to the window again. Outside, the city continued its evening routine, indifferent to the fact that her entire history had just been rewritten. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again, scrolled through her contacts until she found Maya's number, hovered over it, put the phone down. Who did you call when the foundation of your life cracked? Who did you talk to when you realized you'd been living in a house built on misunderstanding? Sarah grabbed her keys and left the apartment. She walked without direction, letting her feet carry her through familiar streets made strange by the turmoil in her head. The evening crowd flowed around her, couples holding hands, friends laughing, solitary figures bent over phones. Everyone living their own story, carrying their own truths and lies and carefully constructed narratives. She found herself at the park, a small green space wedged between buildings, more grass and benches than anything grand. She'd come here sometimes when her grandmother was in the hospital those last weeks, when the antiseptic smell and beeping machines became too much. She'd sit on a bench and pretend everything was normal, that when she went back, her grandmother would be sitting up, complaining about the food, asking about Sarah's life with that piercing insight that always made Sarah feel seen and exposed in equal measure. Now Sarah sat on the same bench and let herself cry. They weren't the pretty tears of movies, neat and silent and decorative. They were the ugly tears of grief and confusion and anger, the kind that left her gasping and snotty and not caring who saw. A jogger passed, then a woman walking a dog, both politely averting their eyes. This was the city. Everyone respected the privacy of public breakdown. When the tears finally subsided, Sarah felt hollowed out but clearer. The initial shock was fading, leaving behind a landscape of questions. Why had her grandmother waited until death to tell her this? What were the other 6 letters going to reveal? And the biggest question, the one that made her stomach twist, what was she supposed to do about her mother? The address sat in her pocket like a loaded gun, full of potential and danger. Sarah pulled out her phone and before she could overthink it, opened her laptop when she got home and booked a flight to Oregon. Not for tomorrow, she wasn't that impulsive, but for 2 weeks from now, a Friday to Sunday trip. Enough time to prepare, or at least to pretend preparation was possible. She also did what any 30-year-old would do in a crisis. She Googled her mother. Grace Morrison, pottery teacher, Ashland, Oregon. The search brought up a website for the community center listing classes. There was a photo of the instructors. Sarah's breath caught when she found her mother's face. Grace was 51 now, her hair more gray than the brown Sarah remembered from old photographs. She had lines around her eyes and mouth, the kind that came from smiling, from time, from life lived. She looked normal, happy, even peaceful in a way that made Sarah's chest ache. She looked like Sarah, or rather Sarah looked like her. The same nose, the same shape of the face, the same way of holding the head slightly tilted as if perpetually curious about the world. Sarah had spent 30 years trying not to be her mother. She'd chosen stability over passion, caution over risk, distance over intimacy. She'd built herself into someone who didn't leave, who didn't abandon, who could be counted on. And looking at this photo, she realized she'd been building herself in opposition to a person she'd never really known. That night, Sarah barely slept. When she did drift off, she dreamed of pottery wheels and gardens and a woman with her face teaching her how to shape clay into something beautiful. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange suspension. Sarah went to work, ate meals, had conversations, all while feeling like she was watching herself from a distance. She was functional but not present, performing normalcy while internally everything had shifted. Maya noticed. "You're different," she said over coffee on the fourth day after the letter. "Different how?" "I don't know, quieter, like you're listening to something the rest of us can't hear." Sarah managed to smile. "Maybe I am." She didn't tell Maya about the letter, about the mother who wasn't dead or indifferent but alive and asking. The information felt too raw, too unprocessed. Besides, she didn't know what she was feeling yet. Anger, relief, confusion, all of it and none of it at once. On the sixth day, Sarah went to the storage unit where she'd placed her grandmother's belongings. She hadn't been back since the week after the funeral, when she'd packed everything with mechanical efficiency, trying not to feel too much about the small accumulation of a life. Books, photo albums, kitchen items her grandmother had loved, quilts she'd made over the years. Now Sarah stood in the small concrete room, surrounded by boxes, and started searching. She found what she was looking for in a box labeled Photos Misc. It was an album she'd never seen before, leather-bound and worn. Inside were pictures of her mother as a child, a teenager, a young woman, Grace at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, Grace at 16. Sullen and artistic, Grace at 19, pregnant and looking terrified. And there were pictures of Sarah as a baby with her mother. They were few, but they existed. Grace holding her, looking down with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read, not the radiant joy of happy family photos, but not absence either. Something more complicated, something like longing and fear mixed together. Sarah took the album home. She spent an evening going through it, trying to find her mother in those frozen moments, trying to find herself. On the 10th day, the second letter arrived. Sarah had been expecting it, watching for the mailman with an anticipation that felt both desperate and dreading. When she saw the familiar yellowed envelope, her hands went cold. She made tea again, Earl Grey with honey, a ritual now, and sat at the kitchen table. Outside, rain was falling, the kind of steady spring rain that made the city smell clean and new. Sarah opened the envelope. "My dearest Sarah asterisk. I hope the first letter didn't break you. I hope you're angry with me for waiting so long to tell you. Anger is good. Anger means you're feeling something besides the numbness I've watched you cultivate over the years. This second truth is about your father, Michael Harrison, the man who gave you his green eyes and his stubborn chin and then disappeared before your second birthday. You've always believed he left because he didn't want the responsibility of a child, and that's partly true. Michael was young and selfish and scared, but it's not the whole truth. Michael was also sick. Not in the way your mother was sick, though mental illness runs through your family like a dark river, touching almost everyone. Michael had bipolar disorder, undiagnosed for most of his young life. His moods swung from electric highs where he could do anything, be anything, promise the world, to devastating lows where he couldn't get out of bed for days. Your mother met him during one of his high periods. He was magnetic, brilliant, full of plans and dreams and impossible charisma. He swept her off her feet, promised her adventure and love and a life bigger than this small town. She believed him because, at 19 and desperate to be anywhere but here, she wanted to believe. They weren't married. He didn't believe in the institution, he said. Marriage was for conventional people and they were going to be different. They were going to travel the world, live on their art, be free. Then Grace got pregnant and Michael's mood crashed. He disappeared for 3 weeks. When he came back, he was a different person, hollow, empty, barely able to speak. Grace tried to help him, tried to pull him back, but she was drowning in her own fear and confusion. How do you save someone else when you're barely keeping your own head above water? Michael met you once, Sarah. You were 6 months old. He held you for 10 minutes while Grace took a shower, the first one she'd had in days. When she came out, he was crying and you were crying and he said, "I can't do this, I'll hurt her, I'll hurt you, I have to go." Grace begged him to stay, to get help, to try, but he was right about one thing: he wasn't capable of being what you needed. Not then, maybe not ever. He left that day. Grace got a postcard 2 months later from California, then nothing for a year. Then a phone call at 2 a.m. Michael manic and talking too fast, promising he'd gotten help, he was better, he wanted to come back. He never did. The next time we heard anything, it was from a hospital in Seattle. Michael had been brought in after a suicide attempt. He survived, but barely. The doctor told us he'd been living on the streets, refusing medication, slipping further and further away from reality. I went to see him, Sarah. Your mother couldn't bear it, but I went. I thought maybe I could convince him to come home, to get proper help, to at least know his daughter. He didn't remember me at first. When he finally did, he asked about you. "Is she beautiful?" he said. "Tell me she's beautiful and happy and nothing like me." I told him you were all of those things. He said, "Good, that's good. Tell Grace I'm sorry. Tell my daughter." He paused, staring at something I couldn't see. "Tell her I loved her the best I could." I asked if he wanted to see a photo. He said no. He said he was afraid if he saw you, he wouldn't be able to leave again, and leaving was the only gift he had to give, the gift of absence, of not damaging you further with his presence. Michael died 6 years later. He was 34. An overdose, possibly accidental, possibly not. The hospital had my contact information from that visit, so they called me. I didn't tell your mother until later. I didn't tell you at all. I arranged a small memorial service, just me and a chaplain who'd never met him. I thought someone should say something, mark the passing of a life, even one as troubled and brief as his. I've kept this from you for so long because I didn't want you to carry the weight of his illness. I didn't want you to look at your own sadness or fear and wonder if you'd inherited his demons. I didn't want you to live in the shadow of his death. But you deserve to know that your father loved you, that his leaving wasn't about your worth but about his unworthiness. That sometimes people don't stay not because they don't care but because caring isn't enough when your own mind is your enemy. You're not him, Sarah. You're not your mother either. You're your own person, shaped by their choices but not defined by them. The depression you've struggled with, the anxiety that keeps you awake some nights, the careful distance you maintain from anything that might hurt you, these are real and they're yours and they're manageable. You don't have to be afraid of turning into them. You get to choose who you become. 5 more letters, sweetheart. 5 more truths. I know this is hard. I know you probably hate me a little right now. That's okay. I can take it. I'm dead after all. What are you going to do, not visit my grave? Please visit my grave sometime. The flowers are probably looking sad. Until the next letter, asterisk. Grandma Rose, asterisk. P.S. Your father's grave is in Lakeview Cemetery, Section C, Plot 47. There's no headstone. I couldn't afford one and there was no family to contribute. But if you want to bring him flowers, I think he'd like that. I think he'd like knowing you existed and grew up and became someone wonderful. Sarah called in sick the next day. She couldn't face the office, couldn't pretend normalcy when she felt like her entire history was being excavated, bone by bone. She spent the morning on the floor of her living room, the letter in front of her, crying in waves. Crying for the father she'd never known, for the desperate choice he'd made, for the decades she'd spent believing she'd been abandoned by 2 people who simply didn't care. But beneath the grief was something else: anger. Sarah had built her entire identity around being the one who stayed, who didn't run, who could be counted on. She'd made herself small and safe and reliable. She'd chosen work that was steady, relationships that weren't too deep, a life that couldn't fall apart because she'd never let it be whole enough to break. And for what? For nothing, because the story she'd been living wasn't even true. Her parents hadn't left because she wasn't enough. They'd left because they were drowning and thought taking her down with them would be crueler than letting go. Sarah wanted to scream at her grandmother, "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me grow up thinking I was the problem?" But Rose was dead, beyond screaming, beyond anger, beyond everything except these letters she'd left behind like breadcrumbs leading Sarah somewhere she wasn't sure she wanted to go. Around noon, Sarah's phone rang. Maya. "Hey," Maya said. "Trevor said you're sick. You okay?" "No," Sarah said, surprising herself with honesty. There was a pause. You want company, I can bring soup or wine or both. Sarah almost said no, almost kept it all locked inside, safe and separate, but Maya's earlier words echoed, you don't have to deal with it all at once. Both, Sarah said, definitely both. Maya arrived an hour later with Thai food instead of soup and a bottle of red wine that was probably too expensive for the occasion but exactly right for the moment. They sat on Sarah's living room floor, food containers spread around them, and Sarah, for the first time in years, told someone the truth. She told Maya about her mother leaving, about growing up with her grandmother, about the first letter and now the second. She told her about the father she'd never known and the man in the hospital who asked if she was beautiful. Maya listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or easy comfort. When Sarah finished, Maya topped up both their wine glasses and said, "That's a lot of weight to carry." "I didn't know I was carrying it," Sarah said. "I thought I'd let it go." "There's a difference between letting go and running away," Maya said gently. "I should know. I did it for a year after my mom died. Quit my jobs, moved across the country, started over. Thought if I left everything behind, the grief wouldn't be able to follow me." "Did it work?" "No, grief is patient. It waits for you to stop running and then it catches up. But when I finally stopped and turned around and faced it, it wasn't as terrifying as I thought. It was just sad, really, really sad, but survivable." They talked until the wine was gone and the food was cold and the light outside had faded to dark. Maya didn't offer solutions because there weren't any. She just sat with Sarah in the mess of it all, and somehow that was enough. As she was leaving, Maya paused at the door. "Are you still going to Oregon?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Part of me wants to, part of me wants to pretend this never happened and go back to my safe, small life." "What does the rest of you want?" Sarah thought about it, to know, to understand, to maybe finally stop running. Maya hugged her, fierce and quick. "Then do that. The being scared part doesn't go away, you just do it anyway." After Maya left, Sarah sat in her quiet apartment and made a decision. She pulled out her laptop and wrote an email. "Dear Grace asterisk. I don't know how to start this, so I'm just going to say it. I'm your daughter. My grandmother died a month ago and she left me a letter explaining why you left. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about that or about you or about any of this. But I'm coming to Oregon in a week. I'd like to meet you, if that's okay. If it's not, I understand. I'm not promising anything. I'm not saying I forgive you or that this is some kind of reunion where we fall into each other's arms and everything is fixed. I just think I need to see you, to understand. My flight gets in Friday at 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop downtown called the Beanery. Can you meet me there at 4? Sarah." She read it twice, changed "your daughter" to Sarah and back again, then hit send before she could overthink it. The reply came in the middle of the night. Sarah woke to her phone buzzing with the notification. "Dear Sarah asterisk. I'll be there. Grace." That was all. No apologies, no explanations, no emotional outpouring, just an agreement to show up. Sarah stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then she set her phone down and for the first time in weeks slept deeply and dreamlessly. The flight to Oregon was unremarkable, cramped middle seat, recycled air, the woman next to Sarah watching romantic comedies on her tablet. But Sarah couldn't focus on anything. She'd brought a book but couldn't make it past the first paragraph. She'd downloaded podcasts but the voices seemed to be speaking a language she didn't understand. All she could think about was the meeting waiting at the other end. 4 o'clock at the Beanery. 4 o'clock and 30 years of absence and anger and wondering. What did you say to a mother who'd been gone your entire life? What did you ask? What did you want? Sarah still didn't know. The rental car was small and efficient, much like everything else in Sarah's life. She drove into Ashland with the windows down, letting the Oregon spring air wash over her. It was beautiful here, mountains in the distance, trees everywhere, a sense of space that her cramped city apartment never had. She'd booked a room at a bed and breakfast, a charming Victorian house run by a cheerful woman named Patricia who immediately tried to interest Sarah in the local Shakespeare festival, the hiking trails, the best restaurants in town. "Just here for the weekend," Sarah said, cutting off the tourism pitch gently. "Well, if you need anything, recommendations, directions, a sympathetic ear, I'm your gal," Patricia said, handing over the key. The room was lovely, soft bed, big windows, everything decorated in that particular style of intentional coziness. Sarah set her bag down and checked her phone. It was 1:30, 2.5 hours until the meeting. She couldn't stay in this room that long, she'd lose her mind. So Sarah drove. She found 427 Oak Street without planning to, without consciously directing the car there, but suddenly she was parked across the street from a small cottage with a pottery wheel visible through the garage window and a garden that was, indeed, well tended. A gray cat sat on the porch railing, washing its face in the afternoon sun. Mabel, presumably. Sarah sat in her car for 20 minutes watching the house, trying to imagine the life that happened inside it. Grace waking up, making coffee, tending her garden, teaching her classes, living a normal, peaceful life while Sarah had grown up wondering why she hadn't been enough to make her mother stay. A figure moved past the window. Sarah's heart jumped. She couldn't see clearly, couldn't tell if it was Grace, but suddenly the watching felt intrusive, voyeuristic. She started the car and drove away. She killed time at a bookstore pretending to browse while actually just walking the aisles in circles. At a park, sitting on a bench and watching children play while their parents chatted. At a coffee shop, not the beanery, where she ordered a latte she didn't drink and stared at the wall. At 3:45, Sarah walked into the beanery. It was a typical small-town coffee shop, mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of espresso and baked goods. A few people scattered at tables, typing on laptops or reading, soft acoustic music playing in the background. Sarah ordered a tea she didn't want and chose a table by the window where she could see the door. Then she waited. At 3:58, a woman walked in. Sarah knew immediately it was Grace, not just from the photo on the website but from something deeper, a recognition that bypassed thought and went straight to the body. This was her mother. This was the woman who'd carried her, birthed her, held her for the first months of her life before the depression swallowed her whole. Grace saw Sarah at the same moment. Their eyes met across the coffee shop and for a heartbeat they both froze. Then Grace walked over, moving carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Sarah," she said, and her voice cracked on the name. "Grace," Sarah replied, unable to call her mom or mother, not yet, maybe not ever. "Can I sit?" Sarah nodded. Grace sat, setting her purse on the floor. Up close, she looked older than in the photo. There were shadows under her eyes and her hands trembled slightly as she folded them on the table. They sat in silence for a moment, taking each other in. "You look like your father," Grace said finally. "The eyes, the way you hold your mouth when you're thinking." "I don't remember him." "I know, I'm sorry for that, for all of it." Sarah had planned what she was going to say. She'd rehearsed it on the plane, in the car, in her head while sitting in that other coffee shop. But now, faced with this woman who was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world, all those words disappeared. "Why did you ask about me?" Sarah blurted out. "Every year on my birthday, why ask if you didn't want to be part of my life?" Grace closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, they were wet. "Because I'm a coward, because asking about you was easier than facing you, because I didn't think I deserved to know you but I couldn't stop myself from wondering. Grandma Rose said you loved me. I did, I do, I just didn't know how to show it, I didn't know how to be what you needed. So you left." "So I left," Grace agreed, "and I've regretted it every single day since, but I've also believed it was the right choice. Those two things can both be true." A barista called out an order. Someone laughed at another table. The world continued around them while they sat in this bubble of tension and hurt and tentative connection. "Tell me about you," Grace said softly, "not the facts Rose gave me. You, who are you, Sarah?" It was such a simple question, but Sarah found she didn't know how to answer it. Who was she? The girl who ran away, the woman who kept everyone at arm's length, the graphic designer who did good work but never quite committed to anything. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I thought I did, but these letters from Grandma Rose, they're changing everything I believed about myself." "How many have you gotten?" "2, there are 7 total." Grace's eyebrows rose. 7, Rose always did love a dramatic reveal. There was fondness in her voice and grief. "I miss her, even though we weren't close at the end, I miss her." "Why weren't you close?" Grace looked down at her hands. Because I couldn't face the judgment I thought I'd see in her eyes every time she looked at me. She took care of you when I couldn't, she was the mother you needed, and I resented her for that even though I was grateful. Does that make sense? No, Sarah said then. Yes, I don't know. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the big things, those felt too heavy, too complicated to tackle in a first meeting. Instead, they talked about smaller things. Grace's pottery, Sarah's design work, the town of Ashland, the city Sarah lived in, books they'd read, places they'd traveled, mundane details that slowly built a picture of two separate lives that might have intersected if things had been different. Sarah learned that Grace had been in therapy for 18 years, that she took medication daily, that she'd built a life of careful routine and manageable stress. She learned that Grace had never had another child, never married, never quite believed she deserved those things after what she'd done. Grace learned that Sarah was talented but anxious, creative but cautious, that she lived alone and liked it that way mostly. She learned about Sarah's college years, her career, the careful architecture of a life built around not getting too attached to anything. "You're like me," Grace said at one point, "afraid of yourself." "I'm nothing like you," Sarah said automatically, defensively. Grace smiled sadly. "Okay." When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, neither knowing how to end this. "Can I see you again before you leave?" Grace asked. "Tomorrow maybe." Sarah wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from getting too close, too invested. But she heard Maya's voice in her head. The being scared part doesn't go away, you just do it anyway. "Tomorrow," Sarah agreed. "Maybe you could show me your studio." Grace's face lit up, a glimpse of joy so pure it made Sarah's chest ache. "I'd love that." 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. They didn't hug. The gap between them was still too wide, the history too heavy. But as Sarah walked to her car, she felt something shift inside her, like a door opening just slightly, letting in a crack of light. Sarah barely slept that night. She kept replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, every expression, looking for what? Proof that Grace was lying about her love, confirmation that leaving had been the right choice, an excuse to pack up and never come back. But all she kept seeing was the trembling hands, the eyes bright with unshed tears, the careful way Grace had chosen her words, like someone walking on ice, testing each step. At 9:30, Sarah drove to Oak Street. In the daylight, the cottage looked even more inviting, flowers blooming in neat beds, wind chimes singing on the porch, everything tended with obvious care. Grace opened the door before Sarah could knock. "I saw you pull up," she said, smiling nervously. "I've been watching the street since 8:30. "You didn't have to. I wanted to come in." The inside of the cottage was small but beautifully arranged. Every surface held pottery, bowls and mugs and vases in shades of blue and green and earth. Plants thrived in corners, books lined shelves, and everything was clean but lived in, comfortable without being cluttered. "You made all of these?" Sarah asked, picking up a mug with a smooth glaze that caught the light. "Over the years, I can't seem to stop making things. It's meditative, the wheel, the clay doesn't judge you, it just responds to your hands." Mabel the cat appeared, regarding Sarah with typical feline suspicion before deciding she was acceptable and rubbing against her legs. "She likes you," Grace said. "She doesn't like most people." They moved through the house to the garage, which Grace had converted into a studio. A pottery wheel sat in the center, surrounded by shelves of tools, buckets of clay, works in progress. A kiln stood in the corner. The space smelled of earth and creativity. "This is where I'm happiest," Grace said quietly. "When I'm making something, I can quiet all the noise in my head, the depression, the guilt, the what-ifs. It all fades and there's just the clay and me." Sarah walked around the studio looking at pieces in various stages of completion. A set of bowls waiting to be fired, a vase with intricate carved patterns, a sculpture that looked like abstract waves. "Will you show me," Sarah asked, "how you do it?" Grace's face lit up again, that same pure joy. "Really? Really?" Grace gathered clay, prepared the wheel, and sat down. Her hands, which had trembled yesterday, were steady now, confident. She centered the clay with practiced ease, her movements fluid and sure. "The first thing you learn," Grace said as she worked, "is that fighting the clay doesn't work. You have to listen to it, respond to it. Too much force and it collapses. Too little and it won't take shape, it's all about balance. Sarah watched as a bowl emerged from the spinning clay, Grace's hands shaping it with gentle pressure, coaxing it into form. It's like therapy, Grace continued. Learning that I couldn't force myself to be better, couldn't just will the depression away. I had to work with it, understand it, find the balance between pushing myself and accepting my limitations. Does it ever go away? Sarah asked, the depression. No, Grace said honestly, but it gets manageable. I have good days and bad days. I've learned to recognize the warning signs, to ask for help before it gets too dark. I've built a life that supports my mental health, routine, medication, therapy, creativity, connection with people who understand. She pulled the bowl free from the wheel, setting it aside. Want to try? Sarah hesitated. I'll probably ruin it. That's okay, that's part of learning. You ruin a lot of clay before you make anything good. Sarah sat at the wheel and Grace guided her hands, showing her how to center the clay, how to apply pressure. It was harder than it looked. The clay wobbled and collapsed. Sarah tried again and again. Don't fight it, Grace said softly, her hands steadying Sarah's. Listen to what it's telling you. And there, in that moment, with clay-covered hands and her mother's voice guiding her, Sarah felt something break open inside her. Not the sharp break of pain, but the gentle break of thaw, of ice melting, of something frozen finally beginning to warm. She started crying, still trying to shape the clay, tears running down her face while the wheel spun. I'm sorry, she choked out, I don't know why I'm. It's okay, Grace said, and she was crying too. It's okay to feel it, whatever it is, it's okay. They stood there in the studio, both crying, the wheel still spinning, the clay collapsing and not mattering at all because something more important was taking shape between them. Sarah stayed in Ashland for the rest of the weekend. She and Grace moved carefully around each other like two people learning a new dance, occasionally stepping on each other's toes but mostly finding a tentative rhythm. They had meals together. Grace cooked simple but delicious food and Sarah helped, learning that she'd inherited her mother's talent for burning garlic but not her patience with dough. They walked through the town, Grace pointing out her favorite spots, Sarah storing away these details like treasures. On Sunday morning, before Sarah's flight, they sat in Grace's garden, drinking coffee as the sun warmed the day. I'm glad you came, Grace said. Me too, Sarah admitted. I didn't think I would be, but I am. Can I? Grace hesitated. Can I call you, not on your birthday, just sometimes? Sarah thought about it. A month ago she would have said no, would have kept that boundary firm, protecting herself from potential hurt. But now. Yeah, she said, you can call. Grace's smile was tremulous and bright. Okay, good. At the airport, Sarah hugged her mother for the first time in 30 years. It was awkward and brief, but it was real. Thank you for giving me a chance, Grace said. Thank you for showing up, Sarah replied. On the flight home, Sarah felt different, lighter somehow despite carrying more questions than answers. The story she'd been telling herself about her life had changed and she was still figuring out what the new story was, but it felt more true somehow, more honest. The third letter was waiting when she got home. My dearest Sarah asterisk. By now you've met your mother if you chose to. If you didn't, that's okay too. These letters aren't about forcing you into anything, they're about giving you choices with better information. This third truth is about me, about Rose, about the woman who raised you and why I was so desperate to keep you safe. I wasn't always a good mother to Grace. I tried to be, but trying isn't the same as succeeding. I was young when I had her, 23, which felt like an adult then but seems impossibly young now, and I was angry. Angry at my husband, Grace's father, who died in a car accident when Grace was 2. Angry at the world for taking him. Angry at myself for not being enough, not earning enough, not doing enough. Angry at Grace sometimes for needing me when I had nothing left to give. I didn't understand depression then, not really. I thought it was sadness, something you could snap out of if you just tried hard enough. When Grace started showing signs in her teenage years, sleeping all day, losing interest in things she loved, talking about how empty she felt, I told her to go outside more, to stop being so dramatic, to think about how much harder other people had it. I thought I was helping, I thought I was making her stronger. I was wrong. When Grace got pregnant with you, I blamed her. Blamed her for being careless, for throwing away her future, for making life harder than it already was. I didn't know about Michael's illness. I didn't know about the postpartum depression waiting to swallow her whole. I just saw a daughter who disappointed me. And then you were born. Sarah, you were perfect, absolutely perfect. And when I held you for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Here was a second chance. Here was an opportunity to do better, to be better, to raise a child the way I wished I'd raised Grace. But that meant I saw Grace's struggles as threats to you. When she couldn't get out of bed, I was angry instead of concerned. When she cried all the time, I told her to pull herself together instead of getting her help. When she tried to hurt herself, I was terrified, but I was also, God help me, relieved when she finally left. Because it meant I could have you all to myself. I could raise you properly without her depression infecting you. I could give you the stable, happy childhood Grace never had. But I did the same thing to you that I'd done to her. I saw your sadness and told you to be grateful. I saw your anxiety and told you to be braver. I saw you pulling away from people and told you to stop being difficult. I didn't recognize the signs because I didn't want to. Because if you had depression too, if you'd inherited it from your mother and your father, then maybe it was genetic. Maybe it was in the family. Maybe it was in me too, and I just spent my whole life calling it anger and grief and disappointment instead of what it actually was. I took you to therapy once when you were 15 and couldn't stop crying for 3 weeks straight. The therapist suggested you might have depression. She recommended medication, ongoing treatment. I thanked her, took you home, and never went back. I told myself I was protecting you from being labeled, from becoming dependent on pills, from thinking there was something wrong with you. But really, I was protecting myself from facing what I'd done to Grace, from admitting I'd failed her, from accepting that my anger might have been illness all along. It wasn't until after you went to college, after I was alone in that house with nothing but time and thoughts, that I finally saw a doctor myself. She diagnosed me with dysthymia, persistent depressive disorder. She said I'd probably had it most of my life. I started treatment at 62 years old. 62, Sarah. Think of all those years I could have been better, done better, helped Grace better, but I was too proud, too scared, too convinced I was fine to see the truth. This is my truth, sweetheart. I failed your mother because I didn't understand what she was going through. And I failed you by not learning from that mistake, by not watching for the same signs, by not getting you help when you needed it. You're 30 now and you've built a life around keeping people at a distance. You work hard but never let it mean too much. You date but never commit. You have friends but never let them too close. You're doing what I did, surviving instead of living, protecting yourself instead of healing. Please don't spend your life the way I spent mine. Please don't let fear and pride keep you from getting help, from seeking treatment, from being vulnerable enough to let people in. Depression isn't a character flaw, anxiety isn't weakness. Mental illness isn't something to hide or fight alone. It's a medical condition like diabetes or asthma, and it deserves proper treatment. I've set up an account for you at First National Bank. There's $15,000 in it. It's everything I saved, everything I could spare. Use it for therapy if you need it. Use it for medication. Use it for whatever helps you be healthy and whole. Or use it for pottery classes with your mother. Use it to take a trip somewhere beautiful. Use it to buy yourself time and space to figure out who you are when you're not running. 4 more letters coming, my love, 4 more truths, but this is the most important one. You deserve help, you deserve happiness. You deserve to stop carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. With all my imperfect love asterisk. Grandma Rose asterisk. P.S. I'm proud of you. I don't think I said that enough when I was alive. But I'm proud of the person you've become despite everything, despite your parents, despite me, despite the stories we told you and the help we didn't give. You're strong and kind and talented, and you deserve every good thing. Sarah sat with the letter for a long time, watching the morning light move across her apartment walls. She'd always thought of her grandmother as solid, steady, the one person who had it all together. But this letter revealed something different. A woman who'd struggled, who'd made mistakes, who'd carried her own undiagnosed illness for decades. Sarah pulled out her phone and did something she'd been avoiding for years. She searched for therapists in her area. The search results felt overwhelming, so many names, so many specialties, so many different approaches. Where did you even start? She texted Maya, "How did you find your therapist?" The response came quickly, trial and error, honestly. First one wasn't a good fit. Second one was, want me to send you some resources? Yes, please. Within minutes, Maya had sent links to directories, articles about finding the right therapist, and a text that said, proud of you. This is hard, but you're doing it. Sarah spent the morning making calls. Most places had waitlists. One therapist had an opening but only did sessions at 7 a.m., which Sarah couldn't imagine managing. Another seemed promising until Sarah heard the intake questions and froze, unable to articulate what she needed help with. Just everything, she wanted to say. Help me figure out how to stop running, help me understand if I'm depressed or just sad or if there's even a difference. Help me learn how to let people in without being terrified they'll leave. Instead, she thanked them and said she'd call back, and then she didn't. By afternoon, Sarah was exhausted and discouraged. This was too hard. Maybe she was fine after all. Maybe she didn't need therapy. Maybe. Her phone rang. Grace. Hi, Sarah said, surprised. Hi, sweetie, is this a bad time? Sarah looked around her apartment at the therapist directories spread across her table, at the letter from her grandmother explaining 3 generations of untreated mental illness. No, it's fine. What's up? I was just thinking about you, wondering how you're doing. You seemed lighter when you left on Sunday, but also like you were carrying something heavy. I know that sounds contradictory. It doesn't, Sarah said. I got another letter from Grandma Rose. Was it a hard one? They're all hard ones, Sarah paused. It was about her depression, about how she didn't help you because she didn't understand it, how she didn't help me for the same reason. Grace was quiet for a moment. Rose had depression. Apparently, for most of her life, she only got diagnosed at 62. God, Grace said softly, that explains so much. I always thought she was just angry at me, disappointed in me. I never considered she might be struggling too. She left me money for therapy, told me to get help. Are you going to? I'm trying, it's harder than I thought. Everyone's booked or the timing doesn't work or I get scared and hang up. Would it help if I shared my therapist's information? She might know people with openings, or I could go with you to the first appointment if you want. Not in the room, just in the waiting room, for support. Sarah's first instinct was to say no, to insist she could do this alone. But then she remembered the clay on the pottery wheel, how it only took shape when she stopped fighting it. Yes, she said. Both of those things would help. Okay, I'll text you Dr. Morrison's number. And Sarah, I'm glad you're doing this. I know it's scary, but you deserve to feel better. You deserve to not carry all this weight. After they hung up, Sarah cried again, but this time it felt different, not the sharp pain of loss or the hot anger of betrayal. This felt like release, like something long held finally letting go. Within an hour, Grace had texted Dr. Morrison's information, and Dr. Morrison had sent back 3 referrals. By evening, Sarah had an appointment scheduled for next week with a therapist named Dr. Lynn who specialized in depression, anxiety, and family trauma. Sarah felt terrified and relieved in equal measure. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm. Sarah went to work, saw Dr. Lynn twice a week, talked to Grace every few days, slowly began to let Maya deeper into her life. It wasn't dramatic or transformative, not yet. It was small shifts, tiny adjustments, like adjusting the focus on a camera until what was blurry slowly came clear. Dr. Lynn was patient and direct, a combination Sarah appreciated. She didn't push Sarah to talk about things before she was ready, but she also didn't let Sarah hide behind deflection or humor. You use distance as protection, Dr. Lynn observed in their 3rd session. The question is, what are you protecting yourself from? Loss, Sarah said immediately. If I don't let people close, they can't leave. But they're not really close then, are they? So you've protected yourself from loss, but you've also protected yourself from connection. Sarah had no response to that. It was too accurate to argue with. The 4th letter arrived on a Thursday, exactly 1 month after the first. My dearest Sarah asterisk. This truth is about family, the one you came from and the one you might build. I never told you much about your grandfather, my husband Tom. He died when Grace was 2, so you never knew him. I've kept his memory close but private, like a treasure I wasn't ready to share. Tom was the love of my life. We met when I was 18, married when I was 20, and had Grace when I was 23. We were young and broke and blissfully happy. He made me laugh every single day. He made me feel seen, cherished, valuable. When he died, drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time, such stupid, senseless waste, I thought I'd die too. The grief was physical, like drowning on dry land. Grace was too young to understand, and I was too shattered to explain. I could have fallen apart. I wanted to, but I had a toddler who needed me, so I locked the grief away and kept moving. Work, bills, parenting, survival, I never dealt with it, never processed it, just buried it deep and kept going. And that unprocessed grief poisoned everything. My relationship with Grace, my ability to be present, my capacity for joy. I was so busy surviving that I forgot how to live. After Grace left, after I had you, I was determined not to make the same mistakes. I was going to be present for you, engaged, involved. And I was, more than I had been with Grace, but I still kept everyone at a distance. I never dated, never remarried, never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. I told myself I was protecting you, keeping my life simple and stable for your sake, but really I was still protecting myself, still running from the possibility of loss. You learned that from me, Sarah, the running, the distance, the fear of losing people. I taught you that not through words but through example, and I'm sorry for it. But here's what I learned too late: love is worth the risk of loss. I had 18 years with Tom, 18 years of joy and partnership and feeling fully alive. When he died, I wished I'd never met him, never loved him, never set myself up for such devastating pain. But now, at the end of my life, I'm grateful for those 18 years. I'm grateful I loved him and was loved by him, because those years were real and beautiful, and nothing, not even death, can erase them. You deserve that, Sarah. You deserve to love and be loved without holding back, without constantly preparing for the ending. Yes, people leave through death, through choice, through circumstance, but some people stay, and the ones who stay are worth the risk. I stayed. I wasn't perfect, but I stayed. And Grace, she left, but she's trying to come back in whatever way you'll allow. And there will be others, friends, partners, maybe children of your own someday, who will stay. Don't let fear of loss keep you from love. Don't make my mistake of surviving instead of living. 3 more letters, sweetheart, 3 more truths. We're over halfway now. I hope you're still with me. I hope you haven't thrown these away or burned them or decided I'm a meddling old woman who should have kept her secrets. But if you have, I understand that too. With love and hope. Grandma Rose *. P.S. There's a box in the storage unit labeled Tom's Things. I couldn't bear to go through it, so I just kept it sealed for all these years. I'd like you to have it. Maybe knowing your grandfather, the person he was, the love we shared, will help you believe that love is possible, that it's worth it. Sarah went to the storage unit that weekend. She found the box exactly where the letter said it would be, a medium-sized cardboard box, taped shut, labeled in her grandmother's handwriting from decades ago. She brought it home, set it on her living room floor, and stared at it for an hour before finally opening it. Inside were pieces of a life, photographs of Tom and Rose, young and in love, letters they'd written to each other during a brief separation when he'd gone to visit his sick father, a watch that had stopped at 3:47, presumably the time of the accident, a sweater that still impossibly smelled faintly of him, a journal he'd kept full of mundane details and profound observations, ticket stubs from movies they'd seen. A menu from their favorite restaurant with a note scribbled on it: best date night yet, can't wait for 1,000 more. They'd had maybe 200 more date nights instead of 1,000, Sarah calculated, 10% of what they'd hoped for. But the photographs didn't look like people living in fear of loss. They looked deliriously happy, completely present, fully alive. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Grace. I opened the box, she said when Grace answered. Tom's box. Yeah, they look so happy. They were, Grace said. I was too young to remember much, but I remember them laughing, always laughing. Were you scared? Sarah asked. After he died, were you scared to love anyone again? Grace was quiet for a long moment. I was young enough that it didn't occur to me to be scared, not then, but later after I left you, after I realized what I'd done, yes, I was terrified. Every time I started to care about someone, I'd sabotage it, push them away before they could leave me or before I could fail them. How did you stop? Therapy, time, medication, and eventually realizing that being alone wasn't protecting me from pain, it was just a different kind of pain and a lonelier one. I'd rather risk loss than guarantee isolation. After they hung up, Sarah looked through the box again, slower this time. She read the letters, studied the photographs, held the watch that had stopped keeping time the day Tom's time ran out. And she understood, finally, what her grandmother was trying to tell her. Not that loss didn't hurt, it clearly devastated Rose, shaped her whole life afterward, but that the love had been worth it, that the 18 years of joy outweighed the decades of grief. Sarah thought about her own life, carefully constructed to minimize risk. No deep relationships, no real commitment, no vulnerability. She was safe, but she was also alone, protected but empty. What would it be like, she wondered, to live like Tom and Rose in those photographs? Fully present, deeply connected, willing to be hurt because the alternative was never really living at all. She didn't know, but for the first time she wanted to find out. The session with Dr. Lin the next week was a turning point. "I want to stop running," Sarah said. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Dr. Lin smiled. "That's a good start. What does stopping look like to you?" Sarah thought about it. "Staying, letting people see me, really see me, not pushing people away when they get too close. Maybe being okay with not being okay sometimes." "Those are all good goals, big ones. How do you want to start?" "Small," Sarah said, "very small." That week, Sarah invited Maya over for dinner. Not takeout eaten while binge-watching TV, but actual cooking, setting the table, having a real conversation. She told Maya about the letters, about her mother, about the therapy, about the box of her grandfather's things. Maya listened, asked questions, shared her own struggles with grief and fear and learning to live again after loss. They talked for hours, and when Maya left, she hugged Sarah tight and said, "Thank you for letting me in." Sarah also called Grace, not for anything specific, just to talk. They were developing a relationship slowly, carefully, like two people learning to trust a bridge they weren't sure would hold their weight. But it was holding, little by little. And Sarah started dating. Not seriously, she wasn't ready for that. But she downloaded an app, went on a few coffee dates, let herself be seen by strangers who might become friends or more or nothing at all. Most of them were fine but not quite right. One guy was boring, another was too intense. One woman was lovely but clearly not over her ex. But Sarah showed up, she tried. She didn't run, even when it was awkward or disappointing or scary. Progress, Dr. Lin said, wasn't linear. There would be good days and bad days, steps forward and steps back. What mattered was the overall direction. Sarah was moving forward, slowly, messily, imperfectly, but forward. "My dearest Sarah asterisk. This truth is about forgiveness, specifically the forgiveness you've been refusing to give yourself. You blame yourself for things that were never your fault. I've watched you do it your whole life. When your mother left, you wondered what you'd done wrong. When kids were mean to you at school, you assumed you deserved it. When relationships ended, you immediately cataloged your failures. You've been carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you, sweetheart. Your mother's depression wasn't your fault. Your father's illness wasn't your fault. My inability to see what you needed wasn't your fault. You were a child, and then you were a young woman, and now you're an adult still believing you were somehow responsible for the actions of people who were struggling with things you couldn't control. I need you to hear this. You were not too much, you were not too difficult, you were not the problem. You were a baby who needed her mother. That's not a moral failing, that's biology. You were a child who wanted stability and love. That's not unreasonable, that's normal. You've been an adult trying to protect yourself from further hurt. That's not weakness, that's survival. But survival and living are different things, and I think you're ready now to choose living. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean pretending you're perfect. It means accepting that you've done the best you could with the information and resources you had at the time. It means recognizing that you were hurt and that hurt people sometimes hurt others, but that doesn't make you irredeemable. You've been hard on yourself in ways you'd never be hard on anyone else. If Maya or Grace or anyone you cared about told you their story, abandoned by parents, raised by a grandmother who meant well but struggled, building a life around fear, you'd have compassion for them. You'd understand their choices, you'd forgive their mistakes. Give yourself the same grace. I'm not saying this will be easy. You've spent 30 years building habits of self-criticism and self-protection. Those patterns are deeply grooved, but they can be changed. You can learn new ways of thinking, new ways of being. You can forgive yourself for asterisk. Being a child who needed things. Having depression and anxiety. Pushing people away. Not being perfect. Taking time to heal. All of it. And once you forgive yourself, you might find it easier to forgive others too, to forgive Grace for leaving, to forgive me for my mistakes, to forgive everyone who's hurt you not because they deserve it but because carrying that anger and resentment is exhausting and you deserve rest. 2 more letters after this one, my love, we're almost to the end. With endless love and belief in you asterisk. Grandma Rose asterisk. P.S. Do something kind for yourself today, something small. Buy flowers, take a bath, eat dessert for breakfast. Practice treating yourself the way you deserve to be treated. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she did something she'd never done before. She looked in the mirror and said, out loud, I forgive you. It felt ridiculous, it felt too small for the magnitude of what she was forgiving, but she said it again. I forgive you for not being perfect, I forgive you for being scared, I forgive you for all of it. The words felt strange in her mouth, unfamiliar, but also somehow right. She bought herself flowers on the way to work, bright yellow sunflowers that made her smile. She took a long lunch and sat in the park, just being present, not checking her phone or making lists or planning anything, just existing. That evening, she wrote a letter to her mother. Dear Grace asterisk. I forgive you. I don't know if I needed to say that out loud, but I'm saying it anyway. I forgive you for leaving, for not being able to be the mother I needed when I was small, for all the years of absence and silence. I'm also learning to forgive myself for all the walls I built, for all the people I pushed away, for spending 30 years running from ghosts. Grandma Rose's letters are teaching me that we're all just doing the best we can with what we have. You did the best you could, she did, and I'm doing my best now too. I'd like to visit again soon, maybe stay longer this time, maybe we could make something together in your studio. Love asterisk. Sarah. She didn't overthink it. She sealed the letter, stamped it, and dropped it in the mailbox before she could change her mind. 3 weeks later, the 6th letter arrived. Sarah had been expecting it, watching for it, but when it came, she still felt unprepared. My dearest Sarah asterisk. This truth is about choice. You've spent your life believing that things just happened to you. Your mother left, your father died, I made decisions for you. You felt like a passenger in your own life, reacting to what others did rather than actively choosing your own path. But Sarah, you've always had more power than you realized. You chose to be kind, even when life was unkind to you. You chose to work hard, to be reliable, to build something stable. You chose to protect yourself, which wasn't always healthy, but it kept you safe when you needed safety. And now you're choosing something different. You're choosing therapy, you're choosing vulnerability, you're choosing to let people in, you're choosing to stop running. These are all choices, sweetheart. Active, powerful choices that you're making about who you want to be. I spent too much of my life believing I didn't have choices. After Tom died, I thought I had no choice but to be hard, to survive, to prioritize practical things over joy. After Grace left, I thought I had no choice but to be both mother and grandmother to you, to keep you safe from everything, including your own feelings. But I did have choices. I could have gotten help earlier. I could have dated, remarried, opened my life to new love. I could have been honest with you about your parents instead of protecting you from uncomfortable truths. I could have chosen living instead of just surviving. I didn't make those choices, I made other ones, and I have to live with that, or rather, I lived with it and now you're living with the consequences. But consequences aren't destiny. You can make different choices than I did, you already are. Here's what I want you to know, you get to choose what your life looks like. You get to choose whether to pursue a relationship with your mother or keep your distance. You get to choose whether to date or stay single, to have children or not, to stay in your current career or try something new. You get to choose whether to keep carrying the weight of family trauma or set it down, whether to let depression and anxiety define you or to see them as challenges you're managing, whether to build walls or build bridges. None of these choices are easy, some of them are terrifying, but they're yours to make. And whatever you choose, I want you to know I support you, I believe in you, I trust you to know what's right for your own life. You don't need my permission, you never did, but if it helps to hear it, you have permission to be happy, to make mistakes, to change your mind, to want things, to need things, to be fully, messily, imperfectly human. One more letter after this, Sarah, the last truth, the hardest one. But you're ready for it, you're ready for all of it. With all my love and pride. Grandma Rose *. P.S. Make a choice this week that scares you, something small or big doesn't matter, just practice choosing actively instead of letting life happen to you, see how it feels. Sarah sat with this letter for a long time, choice. It seemed so simple, but it was revolutionary. She'd been choosing all along, she realized. Choosing isolation over connection, choosing safety over risk, choosing to run instead of stay, these had been active choices even if she'd framed them as reactions. What would it be like to choose differently? That week Sarah made several choices. She chose to ask for a new project at work, something creative and challenging that she'd normally avoid because it meant more visibility, more potential for failure. She chose to invite Maya and 2 other coworkers to her apartment for a game night, opening her space to people, risking mess and noise and the vulnerability of being seen in her personal environment. She chose to book a 2-week trip to Oregon for next month, committing to spending real time with her mother, not just a weekend but enough time to build something deeper. And she chose to go on a 4th date with someone she'd met a few weeks ago, a man named David who was kind and funny and made her nervous in a good way. She chose not to sabotage it, not to find reasons it wouldn't work, not to protect herself from the possibility of caring. Each choice felt small and enormous at once. Each one was terrifying, but Dr. Lin was right, she was choosing actively now and it felt different, powerful even when it was scary. Sarah waited for the final letter with a mix of anticipation and dread. What could be left? What truth was so hard that her grandmother had saved it for last? The letter arrived on a Wednesday, 2 months and 1 week after the first. My dearest Sarah *. This is the last truth and it's the hardest one to write, not because it's particularly dark or dramatic, but because it requires me to be vulnerable in a way I never was while I was alive. The truth is, I was scared too. Scared of losing you the way I lost Tom and Grace. Scared of failing you the way I failed your mother. Scared of my own capacity for harm despite my best intentions. Scared that love would never be enough, that I would never be enough. I hid it well, I was the solid one, the stable one, the one who always knew what to do, but inside I was terrified almost all the time. Terrified that child services would take you away. Terrified that you'd grow up and hate me, terrified that I'd die before I could make sure you were okay. That fear shaped every decision I made. It's why I was overprotective, why I didn't tell you the truth about your parents, why I kept you close and everyone else at a distance, why I didn't date or remarry or let myself be vulnerable with anyone. I thought if I could control everything, if I could anticipate every problem and prevent every pain, then I could keep you safe. But you can't keep people safe from life, Sarah. You can only teach them how to navigate it. I didn't teach you that, I taught you to avoid, to protect, to run, because that's what I was doing. Here's what I wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd let you see me struggle, let you see that adults don't have all the answers, that being scared is normal, that asking for help is strength, not weakness. I wish I'd been honest about your parents from the start. Given you the full story so you could understand them as complex humans who were doing their best, not as villains or victims or simple characters in a simple story. I wish I'd gotten help sooner, for myself, for Grace, for you. I wish I'd believed that therapy and medication weren't signs of weakness but tools for healing. I wish I'd shown you what healthy love looks like, not just safe love or protective love, but open love, vulnerable love. The kind of love that risks hurt because the connection is worth it. Most of all, I wish I'd told you that being scared doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human, and being human with all its fear and pain and messiness is actually beautiful. I'm telling you all of this now because I want you to learn from my mistakes, not repeat them. I want you to know that the fear doesn't go away, but you don't have to let it drive your decisions. You can acknowledge it, feel it, and choose differently anyway. You can be scared and still show up, scared and still love, scared and still build a life that's open and vulnerable and real. These 7 letters have been my attempt to give you what I couldn't give you when I was alive: complete honesty, full transparency, and trust in your ability to handle hard truths. I hope they've helped. I hope they've hurt too, in the way that healing sometimes hurts. I hope they've cracked open the walls you've built and let in some light. What you do with this information is up to you. You might forgive me and your parents, or you might not. You might build a relationship with grace, or you might keep your distance. You might use the money for therapy or pottery classes or a trip around the world. All of those choices are valid. All of them are yours to make. I'm gone now, but in a way, I'm still with you through these words. Still trying to help, still trying to guide, still trying to love you in the only way I have left. And here's the last thing, the most important thing: you are enough, Sarah. You have always been enough, not because you're perfect or because you never make mistakes, but because you're you. Flawed, scared, wounded, healing, brave, human you. You are enough. You are loved. You are free. Live your life, sweetheart, really live it. Make it big and messy and beautiful and full. Let people in, let yourself be seen. Choose love over fear, connection over safety, living over surviving. And when you're scared, because you will be scared, probably often remember that I was scared too. We all are, but we can be scared and brave at the same time. Goodbye, my darling girl. Thank you for being the joy of my life. Thank you for letting me love you, even imperfectly. Thank you for being patient with these letters, for reading them, for letting them change you. Now go live, love, be free. Forever yours, asterisk. Grandma Rose, asterisk. P.S. Visit my grave when you're ready, not out of obligation but when you actually want to. Bring flowers if you like, or don't. Just come and tell me about your life. Tell me about the choices you're making and the person you're becoming. I won't hear you, not really, but somehow I think I'll know, and I'll be proud. 1 year later. Sarah stood in front of the pottery wheel, her hands covered in clay, Grace standing behind her offering gentle guidance. They'd been doing this every Sunday for the past 6 months since Sarah had moved to Ashland permanently. It had been a series of choices, each one building on the last. The choice to take a leave of absence from her job, the choice to spend more time with Grace, the choice to see what life looked like when she stopped running and started staying. She'd found a new job at a small design firm in town. The pay was less, but the work was more fulfilling. She'd started making pottery with Grace, discovering she had some talent for it. She'd continued therapy with Dr. Lynn via video sessions. She'd kept dating David, who'd been patient and kind through her many moments of panic and doubt. Last month, he'd told her he loved her, and she'd said it back, and it had been terrifying and wonderful. Maya had visited twice, once with Sarah's other work friends who'd become real friends. The apartment Sarah rented in Ashland had hosted dinner parties, game nights, spontaneous gatherings. She was building a life that was full and open and sometimes overwhelming, but never empty. Grace had become more than just her mother. She was becoming a friend, a teacher, a person Sarah actually knew and liked. They didn't talk about the lost years much anymore. They focused on the years they had now. "You're getting better at this," Grace said as Sarah shaped a bowl on the wheel. "This one's almost even." "Almost," Sarah agreed, smiling. The bowl wasn't perfect. It wobbled slightly, had a thin spot that might crack in the kiln, but it was hers, made with her own hands, getting better with practice. That afternoon, Sarah drove to the cemetery. She'd been several times now, bringing flowers and updates and sometimes just silence. Today she brought sunflowers, bright and cheerful in the spring sunshine. "Hi, Grandma," she said, settling on the grass next to the headstone. "I have news." She told Rose about her life, about the pottery, the job, David, the choices she was making. She told her about the therapy, about the medication she'd started that was helping smooth the sharp edges of her anxiety. She told her about Grace, about building a relationship slowly and imperfectly but genuinely. "I'm still scared sometimes," Sarah admitted. "Scared that David will leave, scared that I'll mess up this job, scared that I'm making a mistake moving here, changing everything, but I'm doing it anyway, just like you said, scared and brave at the same time." A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. For the letters, for raising me, for everything you did right and even the things you did wrong because they all taught me something. Thank you for being human and scared and imperfect and loving me anyway. She sat for a while longer, enjoying the sunshine, feeling the solid earth beneath her. Feeling, for perhaps the first time in her life, truly present, not running from the past or anxiously projecting into the future but here now in this moment. Eventually, she stood, brushed off her jeans, and headed back to her car. Grace was making dinner tonight. David was coming over. They were trying a new recipe and it would probably be a disaster, but they'd laugh and order pizza and it would be perfect anyway. Sarah drove through the town that was becoming home, past the coffee shop where she'd first met her mother, past the pottery studio where she was learning to create things with her hands, past the park where she sometimes sat and just breathed. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, scared, running, trapped in patterns she didn't recognize. And she thought about who she was becoming, still scared sometimes but staying, still healing but also living, still imperfect but enough. More than enough. Sarah pulled into Grace's driveway, grabbed the wine she'd brought and walked up to the door. Before she could knock, it opened and Grace pulled her into a hug. "I'm so glad you're here," Grace said. "Me too," Sarah replied and meant it completely. Inside, there was laughter and cooking smells and music playing. There was mess and warmth and the kind of chaos that comes from people actually living, not just surviving. And Sarah, for the first time she could remember, felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And real, she was learning, was better than safe, better than running, better than all the carefully constructed walls she'd spent a lifetime building. Real was scary and uncertain and sometimes painful. But real was also this, standing in her mother's kitchen, chopping vegetables while Grace told a story and David laughed and the sunset painted the sky gold. Real was enough. She was enough. And that finally was the truth.